is the 30th of October. Would you believe we're nearly screaming into November, and next thing you'll be saying is Santa Claus. It's oil is trading this morning down. Brent crude oil opening lower, dropping below $90 a barrel on Brent, which seems to be the momentum at the moment. It's yin yang, tip top, plus $90, minus $90. Omar Najia, Global Head of Derivatives of BB Energy. Omar, it seems that this market's stuck on Brent plus or minus 90 until there's some clarity as to the war in Palestine, as to whether it will spread or not. Your thoughts this Monday morning?
And I wish basically the price of oil was waiting to see what's going to happen with the thing, the war in Palestine. I mean, I think, anyway, no, I don't think it's waiting to see what's going to happen. I think basically the war in Palestine can at some point have a big effect. But I think if you look at oil, if you look at trends, not today or tomorrow, but if you look at the trend for oil, the trend for oil basically is going to be a large upside to come. So a very large upside to come. I think basically that the lows that we had, in June, May and June, about 63.50, call it WTI, and maybe like $5 higher for Brent. I think they're going to stay with us for a very long time to come. And the whole kind of picture on oil has to do with if you expect a kind of inflationary or deflationary environment. And I think very much it's going to be an inflationary environment. And how you measure inflation is all, they'll tell you that it's, abating or not going up as much or whatever. But I think basically if you look at oil and if you look at it adjusted for the price of inflation, it's extremely cheap. But if you look at geopolitics, the, risk is to the upside. So whichever way you want to turn this market, I think basically we're going to go higher. The question is from what level? I doubt that it's from here and now. I think basically you have to have whatever length is in the market maybe flush out a little bit. We haven't really done anything for a few days, even since last week. But I think basically maybe we move sideways to lower, and only then do we start basically assaulting the highs and get to $110 Brent, something like that, and we hear everybody scream and say how much they're suffering and how bad higher prices are, and then I think they'll go even higher than that. So that's my view looking forwards.
Laurie Hatayan, MENA Director, Natural Resource Governance Institute. Laurie, the world has certainly changed since we last had you on, and we were waxing lyrically about this new trade corridor between India and Europe passing through Palestine, and everybody singing well. The world is now upside down on all of those things. I wonder where we would come in at it, get your views on. Let's talk about the contagion issue, which seems to be, from a market's point of view and everybody else's point of view, I suppose, still the biggest question mark now that the land invasion of Gaza has started. What's your read on the situation from a regional point of view of this conflict spreading?
Look, there were like at the beginning of the war, I guess, everybody was looking to Hezbollah and Iran and what the reaction would be. And it was clear that Hezbollah said that any ground invasion will push us to help our friends in Palestine and our friends Hamas, basically. And then we saw that there were like issues happening on Lebanon front, even though there are voices asking for Lebanon not to enter into the war. But yes, Lebanon is into the war. When you have all these bombardments happening on the borders, on the southern borders, people leaving, journalists dying because they were hit by bombs, etc. There is war in Lebanon, even if it's in South Lebanon, even if it's on the border villages, but this is part of Lebanon. So Lebanon is part of the war. And this is what kind of Hezbollah saying that we are kind of involved. Don't expect us to do a bigger operations, but we are at war and helping you as much as we can, because there are voices from Hamas saying that we need more involvement. The big question, I guess, that has implications on the market is the role of Iran. Does Iran want to be part of this war? And it knows that if the war expands, it will be with the Americans more than being it with the Israelis, and all the military equipment that is in the Middle East, that is in the Eastern Mediterranean, that is not like for Hamas. That is like to deter Hezbollah and Iran. Does Iran? So now it depends where Iran sees its benefit. Does it see it in full escalation with the Israelis and therefore with the Americans, or does it see it in a calculated operation, the way they are doing it in Iraq, they are the way doing it in Syria, the way in Lebanon, and then get the benefit of not entering into a full-scale war? Because don't forget that before all of this, as you said, Sean, we were talking about normalization between like Saudis and the Iranians. We were even talking about this big deal between Iran, between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And we were talking about spoilers. We said that they cannot ignore the spoilers because the spoilers will come and bite. And we are seeing today, I guess everybody was surprised because people thought that Hamas, Hezbollah, and the rest, they get their cues from Iran. And today there are divisions between, did Hamas do this operation in collaboration with Iran or without it? Early on, the Americans and the Israelis were the first one to say that this is not Iran. And then the markets were okay. Like, okay, if it's not Iran, so there will not be new sanctions on the Iran or attacks, the oil market is fine. Today, we're like, what will Iran decide to do? Which is more beneficial, to do calculations?
What are we putting Iran aside? We have the Saudi defense minister going to Washington today. The Gulf states and Saudi Arabia yesterday put out a pretty, what I would say was their first strong statement to call for a ceasefire.
Yes, to call for a ceasefire, not to go into an oil embargo or use oil in the way they used it in 1973. It's like to push for a ceasefire and to work in that direction. So this is where we are seeing it. I don't see any kind of action that will be like the 1973.
Sure. Narendra Taneja, India's leading energy expert. Narendra, from your perspective in India, clearly this is a global event. How is it looking? How do you read it from there? So far, it would appear, just on the selfish oil markets point of view, it's had little effect. The oil markets have bumped up a few pennies, down a few pennies, but I would say on all looking rather calm in the oil markets.
Well, you see, Ukraine was different, but Hamas, Israel is a totally different story as far as India is concerned. This is happening closer home. And this is happening in an area which is a very important source of energy for India. We also have 9 million Indians working there in different parts of that region. And we are also, our economy and the economy of the Middle East is kind of very closely integrated. So therefore, you can understand that, there's huge lot of anxiety in Delhi on the whole issue. And India is also talking with different leaders, including leaders in the West and President Biden, to see that how can this basically be put back into the bottle. We know it's not that easy, but at the same time, we in India, we hope that it would not escalate. And because if it escalates, and the problem is then that, and the supply, oil supply and the gas supplies are interrupted, then that will create a huge problem, not only in terms of prices going northward, but also in terms of supply disruption. So that's India's main worry. But so far, it looks like that probably, the way part of the Hamas has responded, and we expect that if these 250 hostages are released, then probably, even if there is no ceasefire, there would be at least, that would be contributing in creating a kind of atmosphere the parties can sit across the table. If not across the table, at least, talk behind the table, so using diplomatic channels which are available, which includes, of course, Western countries and China and Russia, India, and several other countries. So right now, the worry basically is this. When we look at it from New Delhi or DC or London, it's a very different story. But when you see the very high emotions on the side of Palestinians and at the same time on the side of Israel, that's where basically, the future is going to be written as far as this conflict is concerned. And so when we look at from other geography, it's a different story. But when we look at things, these very high emotions in that part of the world, in Israel and Palestine, Western, region, etc., that worries us. We don't know, because we know from the history, when emotions take over, then it
Well,
becomes...
as we approach 10,000 murdered in Palestine and Gaza, emotions are going to spread much further than Palestine. Omar, looking at the other sort of basic fundamentals we're seeing in the marketplace, we've got the Fed meeting this week. We've got there's reports of growing, as they call them, non-performing loans in the banking system in Middle America. Your thoughts on some of the other fundamentals of this market? Are they irrelevant at the moment when the sentiment is distracted?
Well, I mean, I think basically the way you should view this market is not to do with a kind of a slowdown, because people have been saying for ages now that a slowdown is coming, a recession is coming, and they're wrong, and they'll continue to be wrong. The reason they continue to be wrong is all this spending by the US. So interest rates at 5%, that's wow, that's really high. No, it's not, because the US last month, I think in September, added $600 billion to their deficit, right? All the spending on the wars now in Israel and Ukraine, their deficit this year is going to be close to $2 trillion. Their debt is massive.
The budget deficit in the US.
Yeah, you can forget about this idea that prices are going to come off. We're gonna go the other way, completely the other way. Inflation is going to kick in, and the way they measure it, by the way, is they take out stuff like food and stuff like energy. Because if you knew what the real numbers were, inflation is way over 10%. In any case, the other problem that you have is basically a fundamental misunderstanding about the geopolitics involved here. This is not. This is basically Israel needs to basically go in to Gaza, no matter what. The reason they need to go in is they need to basically reassert what they call deterrence, right? Without going into Gaza, Netanyahu is finished, the Israeli government is finished, and basically Israel has no deterrence left. They must go in, which means what? Which is why you have all this build-up and all the rest of it. It's not going to be, it's going to be finished soon, put it back in a bottle. That's the least likely outcome. The most likely outcome is Iran must go in. The US must support it. This thing goes out of control. Out of control in what way? In that basically you see another binary kind of thing. Hypocrisy between Ukraine and Palestine. The world basically viewing this thing, saying one thing, the Americans saying the other. War crimes in Ukraine are not war crimes in Palestine. And what's that going to do? What that is going to do is it's going to make it very difficult for the leaders in Jordan, in the GCC, anywhere in Turkey, in Egypt, anywhere, to basically just, turn a blind eye and whatever. Hamas now, I mean, I look at Telegram, so I have no direct knowledge, but Hamas is actually saying to Hezbollah right now, we don't want you in. You wait. Hezbollah is going to come in, but Hezbollah is going to do it very gradually and over a period of time. Israel has had 2 reconnaissance things into Gaza, and they have been repulsed. The first one was with American Delta Force. I've seen pictures of Merkava tanks blown up. I've seen pictures of Kornet missiles hitting delivery trucks, armored vehicles of the Israeli army. The bottom line is you have to understand what I've been saying for ages. The news that you get from the mainstream media is all sanitized. It's not what's happening. They tell you Ukraine is winning. Ukraine is lost. They tell you that Israel is, pinprick, I don't know what, scalpel, surgical strikes, bollocks. So at the end of the day, we are not seeing the full picture. I'm telling you, as time goes on, this thing.
Well,
is
I think
worse.
you can. This bombardment is so severe. You can see it from space. The satellite imagery is quite extraordinary. Laurie, trying to come back to the sort of our little sort of corridor here. Israel awards gas exploration licenses to Eni and BP. Not the greatest week to be receiving licenses in the Eastern Med, but still a lot of opportunities for development there. Where's the Lebanese and others going to be joining this party?
Yeah, so look, for Israel, like yesterday, the announcement came, and I think it's part of, like, the timing is a bit like, okay, it's to signal that still people, like the companies, are still interested in Israel, that the Israeli economy is doing well regardless of the war going on, because there were all these indicators about like Israeli markets and Israeli business doing really bad because of the war and because of all the bombardment on Tel Aviv. You know, usually it wasn't Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv was living in a bubble, etc., and everything was okay when there were attacks on Hamas or on Gaza or even the West Bank. So the announcement comes in, but the announcement is part of when in July, the Ministry of Energy in Israel had declared that there were 4 groups of companies that applied for the 4th licensing round in Israel. And at that time, they said that there were 5 new companies coming into the sector. That was in July. Today, end of October, they announced that, and you have 2 groups of companies out of 4 that got the awards, and you have 4 new companies coming in, which are like Eni is a big deal coming in with Dana Petroleum and with the Ratio. Ratio is an Israeli company. On this other side, you have SOCAR, the Azeri company, with BP coming together with NewMed. And interesting stuff is, like, a couple of months ago, BP with ADNOC, they wanted to buy 50% of NewMed. And today BP is in collaboration with NewMed on that Zone I, which is closer to the borders of Lebanon. And Eni is a big surprise as well. So implications on Lebanon, just to say that Eni with Total Energy and with Qatar Energy had applied to 2 blocks in Block 8 and 9 in Lebanon, and the Lebanese government is still looking at the bids. So now Eni being part of the Israeli sector, what will reaction be in Lebanon? That is really interesting to hear what the Lebanese will say about Eni being part of this new oil and gas sector in Israel. And I think the other questions, like for Lebanon, the future of oil and gas is like uncertain. The last thing we heard in Block 9, and it was official that Total couldn't find gas in Block 9, which was like the whole attention, the national attention was like on Block 9, which was part of the maritime border deal, saying that Lebanon will find gas and then Lebanon will be okay and its economy will be safe. So that was the popular statements. That was something supported by all political parties. Today, Block 9, there is no gas. You have Block 8 and 10 that you have bids on it. Eni is part of it, and today Eni is part of Israel. What will happen, especially under these new circumstances where Lebanon is at war with Israel, when Gaza is being bombarded, and people are being tragically killed there? So what's going to happen? I don't know. So that's definitely
I wonder if any
sector is not going to do well. On the other side, you have new companies coming and bidding in Israel. I don't know when they would. It's first they have 3 years license, 3 years award to do some drilling, and then they can extend it to 2 years, and the 5th time they can develop it. But like, this is, I think, part of Israel saying that we are doing okay and new companies are interested, even though,
I mean,
but
of
not
course,
to forget that was the award before 7 October. What will happen after 7 October, it's to be watched.
Well, I suppose you still have Europe seeking gas reserves wherever they can. There was news today also of the German Chancellor just arriving in Nigeria on a mission there, looking to invest in the development of gas in Nigeria. Narendra, meanwhile, India's sort of energy imports and outlook for energy, again, sort of picking up in the earlier comment, the Saudis have currently are operating at 1 million barrel a day voluntary cut. Which means ultimately there's a lot of idle oil supply in the world. And maybe that's one reason why, despite these major conflicts in Palestine and in Ukraine, that the markets are relatively calm, because there is a lot of spare capacity. Your views on the role of spare capacity and inventories in keeping this market a little bit calmer than the geopolitics would suggest?
Well, 2 quick points. First, what you mentioned, the price and supply, and second is India Middle East economic corridor. Actually, it's an essential energy corridor. the first point. You see, as far as the supply is concerned, I don't think that we are actually too worried about it, unless it becomes a full-fledged war involving Iran. Then, of course, there would be supply disruptions, looking at the geography and Hormuz area and so on and so forth. So that's a major worry. Right now, we think that the market response has been very measured, and market response overall has been rather mature. So there is no big anxiety. So India is not ready to press the panic button as yet. But we are keeping a very close eye, and our sense is probably Iran would not really get involved in a kind of warlike situation. Maybe supporting from behind, we don't know, but getting involved full-fledged, we don't think there's a possibility. As far as today is concerned, but emotions high, anything can go. But as far as supply is concerned, that's not our worry is always the price. India is extremely price sensitive. Anything that's more than $80 per barrel actually is a bad news for India's economy. And so therefore our worry, as I said, is so far supply is not, though Middle East is a major supplier of oil to crude oil to India, and also natural gas, that's come from Qatar mainly. But that said, at the same time, our main worry are two. As I said, the price, and the second is the future of India, Middle East, Israel, Europe economic corridor. That's very important.
Which emerged out of India's hosting of the G20.
Absolutely. It was agreed upon that time, and India has been celebrating, the US has been celebrating. An American president just 3 days ago said that Hamas might have basically attacked in order to sabotage the whole thing. Not exactly this language, but that's what he meant. Many in India believe that the whole idea is to basically sabotage this economic corridor and to somehow stop Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, a few other states in those areas to basically stop the reforms. For India, since we are the third largest Muslim country in the world in terms of population, reforms in Saudi Arabia is very critical. Because if Saudi Arabia's reforms are put on the back burner, or they apply reverse gear, bad news for India, very bad news for India, bad news for the entire region. Because if Saudi Arabia becomes a modern economy, a modern society, or a moderate society at least, that's a great news for Muslims living elsewhere in other parts of Asia, but most importantly, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Because many of the people here, they look upon Saudi Arabia. If Saudi Arabia becomes a modern society or more mainstream, then Muslims in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, they would have something to look up to, and then accept the kind of reforms so that they can be mainstream players in this part of the world. So that's number one. And at the same time, when you look at the economic potential, Saudi Arabia may not be as large in terms of population as Iran, but Saudi Arabia is a very important economic player. Therefore, we expect that this only a temporary setback to the economic corridor. It's a temporary setback if there is any to the economic reforms. And the same goes to United Arab Emirates. If the Arab street wins, and Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, even Oman, they're basically, forced to put all these reforms on back burner. That's extremely bad news for countries in our part of the world, and very bad news for the whole world, if you ask me. Because if that was the target, if that was the objective of Hamas, then I think it's very important that they are not allowed to succeed in that. But that said, at the same time, what is important is Palestinians, they deserve their own home, they deserve peace, they deserve prosperity, and it's important Israel accepts it as soon as possible. Because when you look at the history, when you look at the present situation, when you look at the visuals which are coming out, it's very important that Palestinians, they get their home as soon as possible. And the entire world, including India, the United States, must be actually pushing Israel to work in that direction. We need to find a solution which is sustainable, which is kind of permanent, because Middle East is very, very important for many economies, most particularly India, is the junction that connects India with not only Middle East, but the whole of Africa, especially North Africa and Europe. This economic corridor will change the economic, political, social landscape of the entire Europe, Africa, and Asia forever. Therefore, we need to invest in it, and Israel needs to do whatever necessary to bring peace.
Man, honestly, stop. Honestly, I have to say something. Narendra, I'm really sorry. The world is not India. The Palestinians have been suffering for 75 years. It's got nothing to do with your corridor. So stop, honestly. It upsets me greatly. I'm sorry, the world doesn't revolve around what India wants or doesn't want. These people have been suffering for 75 years. The last thing on their mind is this economic corridor with India and the most important thing in the world. Sorry.
No, but let me just a second. You see,
Yeah,
as I said, what is important is that, Palestinians, they get their own home and they get peace.
Narendra, after you
is what
said
is
all
important.
this stuff about India, after that, then it suddenly dawns on you that they must have and they must have. You said that Hamas did this because, I mean, honestly, the geopolitical analysis, my view.
okay, all
That's
right,
allegation. We don't know the truth. That's the allegation by many. And President Biden also talked about it. This is not
But
government.
Biden has
We
no
don't know.
idea what day
We
it
don't
was,
know
let
the truth.
alone what his allegations are. Honestly,
Yeah.
the world doesn't revolve around
let's
We can
go
only
to
talk about what we read in the media.
yeah.
I've never been to,
I
I've never
think
been to Gaza,
I
so I don't know.
yeah. It's clearly a an event that is has many ramifications. There's no doubt about that. Let's give Laurie, or did we even do the survey question? I've forgotten now in the motions of it all. No, we didn't. Let's do the survey question just for fun for Omar, because Brent's stuck at 90 plus or minus until it's clear whether war in Palestine will spread to region or not. Brent's stuck at 90 plus or minus. Basically, it's caught in the headlights at the moment, and it doesn't know which way to go until there's some geopolitical clarity. Laurie, last word with you this morning, from a European point of view, because I know that's where you're sitting at the moment. The vantage point from there, we had the foreign ministers meeting in Europe, and the attempts by Europe to come to some sort of unified position on the Israel invasion of Gaza, etc. Is there one? Does there need to be one? What are your thoughts on what this means for Europe?
Yeah, first of all, let me say that usually they say that women are very emotional and they cannot hear the other. And now we see that men can be more emotional than women. So that's
this is
one
certainly
I have to say.
Exhibit A.
So the other point is like, look, the voting that happened in the UN for the ceasefire showed that there is no one position in the EU, and it is they were like divided between those countries that wanted the ceasefire to happen and countries that were abstaining or against it. Basically, again, we talk about the EU, but at the end of the day, it is all about the member states' interest. So whoever has like whatever interest in the region between like in Israel or in Palestine, they voted according to their interest. And that is what we have seen. But more importantly, I guess, like, again, we see that they were like countries like Italy, Giorgia Meloni was in Israel, and she was supporting. And then you see ENI applying for this bid in Israel because she needs the gas. She needs as much as she can gas to be able like to supplement or to replace the Russian gas. So that is one exhibit about the interest. For instance, Cyprus and Greece, when they abstain or they are against, it's not because they are against the Palestinians, but they do have interest in Israel. And for them, that whole East Med Gas Forum that they created, the energy corridors that they created, or the plans to create, they were all like to deter Turkey or to balance Turkey's interest in the Eastern Mediterranean, or between the issues between Greece and Turkey. So these were the things that were pushing these member states to vote on this issue of ceasefire. It was on pure interest of these countries and nothing to do with the EU values. And that's what we have seen. We didn't talk about Turkey, Sean, because it's very interesting that after 100 years of the existence of Turkey, as like Atatürk had created it, Erdogan today is talking about when Gaza was part of the Ottoman Empire. So very interesting, but I know that we don't have time, but maybe later one day we can discuss what Turkey is doing. But definitely, again, the relations between Turkey and Israel went again sour, and the Israelis had to call back their ambassador
I suppose
something to watch for.
Yeah, absolutely. The market looking for direction until this conflict has some direction. There's no doubt that I suppose the next phase of this, as we've seen in the last few days, as you mentioned, Erdogan getting very vocal now about the position of Turkey, because you're having after the initial wave of sympathy with the Hamas attack, and now 2-3 weeks later, the scale of the revenge is troubling many. So we're going to go through a period this week, it seems, when with the Saudi defense minister in Washington today, and Erdogan and others, what will be the noise level that starts to grow on the back of the ground invasion, and what will be the ramifications of that growing diplomatic effort to we'll have to watch that. The market will stand on the sidelines, I suppose, until there's some clarity on all of that. We'll wrap it up there. As we started, Brent crude oil trading down this morning, below 90, ending last week above 90. It's sort of ping pong until there's clarity. That seems to be the case with me. Narendra Taneja, thank you so much for joining us this morning from India. As always, great to have your voice. To Omar Najia, the anchor of Monday Mornings, wouldn't be the same without him. And of course, our Laurie Hatayan, our European correspondent these days. We appreciate your insights and contributions, and we hope to see you all soon again. Thank you so much. Have a great week.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.